We are so thankful for the rich heritage that we have. And this time, Dr. Gina Fonte.
Undoubtedly, many of you are wondering when you receive the call, what is the CAC and why are these people calling me on, when I'm so busy? And so I wanted to start off by contextualizing exactly what the CAC is, why we've come together, and why it's so important for you to be here this evening. The CAC was conceptualized initially out of a number of informal conversations among a group of peers who were frustrated with a number of things that were going on in the community. Not just frustrated, but I would go so far as to say that it varied on a continuum from being mildly aggravated to being distraught about conditions that were going on in Ventura County in particular. And so what we noticed as we began to talk and dialogue about this was that there were certain themes that were starting to come up. That those of us that were experiencing these feelings of being unsettled, feelings of being marginalized, who thought that we were in isolated situations, really were not. That this was going on not only in Oxnard, but we started realizing that some similar situations were going on in Ventura, in Simi Valley, in Moore Park, and they were all the same. And so we took the time to sit down with a group of experts who were imported, who had no ulterior motives, no affiliations, to ask them, how do we go about really sitting down and in some sort of mindful, strategic way, looking at what's going on and bringing people together to discuss how we can, not individually, but collectively, as a collaborative power, as a substantive power in this community, come together and start making some changes. And so after having that training, we sat down and we said, okay, well, we know how it's supposed to be done, but how do we know if our visions are all the same? We have to be in alignment with one another. And so we sat down, and what we did initially was we generated a mission statement that we felt would encapsulate and articulate what came out of those meetings. And so I'd like to share it with you, and if you have it, you can read along with me. The Community Advocacy Committee. The Community Advocacy Committee is a body composed of pastors, community-based organizations, community stakeholders, that would be you, and concerned citizens dedicated to the education, empowerment, mobilization, and advancement of Ventura County's African-American community. The CAC, in conjunction with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, seeks to identify and advocate for African-American interests, increase parity, and improve the overall quality of life for African-descended people in the local, state, and national levels. And so, our motivation by here today is to partner with you and to invite you, if indeed these are your goals, your dreams, and to also give feedback. Tonight is going to be an evening of sharing. We're going to be imparting quite a bit of educational material to you, and then we're going to invite you at the end to participate and to join us. It's my understanding that there are a number of organizations in this county that are working towards similar goals. And what we've come to know is that the fist is always stronger than any one finger. And so we're inviting you to come and join us in our efforts. Thank you very much.
That was an awesome word. Everybody put your hand up. With one finger, you can push something. With two fingers together, you can kind of flip it. But with the fist, you can make it. it is my honor, it is my privilege that we welcome Mr. John R. Hatcher.
You know, I want to first thank everyone for being here, but to talk about things that I'm involved in, things that I always ask a friend of mine to speak on my behalf. So we don't have on the agenda. I'd like to get the Reverend Cowley to come up. I'd like to get Reverend Cowley to come up and just talk about some of the things that we have to deal with in our community, in our life, and our kids. And I know that before it's over, Jesus is going to break down the sad process that the system has for dealing with us and our kids. And, you know, the sad thing is to be not all prepared because I was getting all my stuff together. And this afternoon I get a phone call from the bank saying, oh, by the way, we need you to have space because we just sold your house. I said, what are you talking about? And so when we talk about how they treat us, by law, they're supposed to notify me if in fact that they're going to do something. It didn't happen. So I was fighting with them like crazy, trying to get things changed. But I'm going to stop there and I'm going to turn this over to my friend. Reverend Cowley.
I want to thank Mr. Hatcher. And almost a year ago, Mr. Hatcher asked a few of us to get together and to discuss and to begin a dialogue on some of the most important issues that affect the black community in Ventura County. And we got together, a few of us, and we took it very serious and very strategic. And as we started discussing some things, we found out some things that were very shocking to all of us, certainly to me. And one of the things that we have done is we put those things, the issues that were most threatening and most pressing in the black community, down in a group of about maybe 4 or 5 different main issues, which you will hear about those in an outline form tonight. Tonight's meeting is really just the rollout of one of many strategic gatherings that will come. And I want to ask you all for the next few moments, because you'll meet some of the people involved in the committee and some of the people who gave their time and gave their mind to come up with what we felt Mr. Hatcher was looking for, and ultimately, as we begun to do this, we found out it was somewhat like a calling. About 2 years ago, my life changed with a knock on the door. 6 DA investigators put handcuffs on myself and my wife in our pajamas and carried us away. And one of the things that I have heard with my ears and seen with my own eyes in the last 2 years, this is not stuff that someone relayed to me through the grapevine. This is stuff that I've witnessed firsthand as a pastor of over 20 years, police chaplain for 13 years. I witnessed firsthand what the institutional powers feel about our community as black people. And in one word, I can tell you without hesitation, without biting my tongue, without second guessing, I can tell you what the institutional powers that exist think about our community, because I heard it with my own ears. I've talked to some of the retired politicians, judges, attorneys, people with deep pockets that we would think are people of power. They think of our black community, one word, I can tell you, I've heard it so many times from one word. Here's that word, invisible. And after hearing this over and over, you start to believe that they do believe this. And what I would like to ask you for just the next few moments, because we have other committee people that will talk, and I'll come back and share just a little bit. I want to ask you, please ma'am and please sir, for the next few moments, if you could really give your undivided attention to hear not only what we say, but the spirit in which we say it. Let me tell you why I say this. This is no longer a system that exists that's trying to discriminate against us. There is an elimination going on in Ventura County of African Americans. We have the data to prove it. And all I'm asking you to do, I read a research just some time ago that said that when black people get together, whether it's a social function, a professional function, or a church function, 97% of our inner thought, words we say to ourselves, are negative about our own people in the meeting. So what I want to ask you to do during the next few moments of this meeting, please govern that 97% of self-talk so that we can come together and perhaps, if nothing else, walk out of here in a different light, different vision than we walked in. The final thing I want to say, and then other committee members you will meet, and just before you meet them, we want to meet you. But I want you to think about the house you live in and the block that you live on. Imagine one of the homes on fire. Your attitude could be, it's not my house, I'm going to let it burn. Come on, that's okay. And if you let it burn, here's what you know. It will burn your neighbor's house, and then the next neighbor's house, and eventually it will get to your house. So the wise thing to do is say, I have to help my neighbor put the fire out of on his home, or soon it will be my home burning. Here's what I'm trying to say. Ma'am and sir, if we don't do something right now, I promise you, your house will burn next. Your child, your mate, your nephew, your nieces, it will happen if we don't do something. So before you meet the rest of the committee members, we are very honored Mr. Hatcher asked us to get involved in this. I see many of you here tonight, a lot of out-of-the-box thinkers, which I'm very glad to see. You know my friend Daryl Goodman be here, who is a change agent, an incredible, brilliant man. I'm glad he's here because there are people like him and you all that we want to come to the table. But before you meet the rest of the committee group, very quickly, because we want to stay on a time schedule, we would like to go around very quickly and ask each one of you if you would just quickly tell us your name, where you're from, and if you're with an organization, what organization you're with. What a distinguished group. You being here tonight tells us a lot about who you are, but more important, tells us about where you're going. I want you to meet the group who Mr. Hatcher asked to get together and have been meeting for almost a year. So I'd like to ask the members of the team, a couple people aren't here tonight. For those of you who are here, you'll come up and please introduce yourself.
Hello, James Joyce, originally from Maryland, been in Oxnard, California, lived in downtown for a little over 2 years now. Currently the field representative for your state assemblyman Boswell.
I'm a multicultural community psychologist. I hail originally from South Central LA. Welcome, Compton. See you here. Good to have you here. Long trip. And I am a relatively recent resident here in Oxford. I'm Mr. Campbell. I've been in Oxford for about almost 30 years. I am the only program specialist of the Oxnard Elementary School District. I've been there for almost 8 years. I've been a special education teacher, however, for about 20 years. So I've been around the block for a long time, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm also part of the NAACP and a member of the teacher center, and also embassy.
Come on, say it. Say it.
You will not let me off with that one.
My name is Musa Rahman. I'm a long-time resident, a lifetime resident of this area right here. In fact, I attended classes in this building here, so a little bit here on the life. And where you're at is a kind of a centralization of the organization. The idea
And so this is a project of life-skills, educational vocation, and it's an ongoing effort that we intend to broaden out to the community. I would love to let you know that you found your family happy.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Board, I think I know probably 90% of the people in here. And I'll tell you a little more about me during my presentation. Thank you.
So at this time, we'll have the presentations, and we'll go in the order that was discussed in the meeting. So we'll go to education, criminal justice, housing, healthcare system. So those of you who are going to give a quick presentation on that, please come on up in that order. And I promise you this will move quickly, and then we'll open the floor up.
Now, please help yourself to some refreshments also.
Okay. Again, I'm very happy to be here. And as I said to you before, I am an educator, have been for almost 30 years. Education is dear to my heart. One of the things that you, as you're aware, that's happening in the budget cuts, not very good for anyone in America. It's certainly not good for African Americans, because I think it's hitting us very, very badly. But let me tell you a little bit about that. Without question, the budget cuts is affecting all Americans, blacks, whites, browns, in all areas of their life. Today, however, we will narrow the focus on the impact on the lives of African Americans as the budget cuts continue to diminish educational funding and threaten the future of our youth. Education, more so quality education, is paramount to the success and advancement of all African Americans. The level and equality of it will either open doors to opportunity or close them. To African Americans, education was, and still is, the silent weapon that was used to fight against the war of slavery, degradation, inequality, which liberated us and gave us the courage to stand tall, square our shoulders, and demonstrate to a racist world that we have the capability to contribute to the elevation of society. Education, or knowledge, spiritually and intellectually, truly is power. We've heard that saying much. Knowledge is power. It truly is power. In fact, one of my best friends wrote a book. My very best friend. Great book. This is what he said in his book. White people perish for a lack of knowledge. He said it. He's the best one around. He said it. Must be true. They perish for lack of knowledge. Is it then possible that we can be destroyed as a people in education if educational funding continues to diminish? Here's what the research shows. The drop-off rate of our kids has increased 50%. That means when we send our boys and girls to school, 50% of them that started as freshmen will not graduate. They will not graduate. Not good. And for those that graduate, only 20% of those will attend community college, which is one of the bridges that is used for them to transition into universities. Only 20% of them. And if you think that's bad, in California, only 5% will enroll in our universities in California. 5%. Do you think we have a problem here? Yeah. Yes, we do. And we've learned that in California, and also another research showed that only 2%. 5 may go to the state universities, and only 2% will go to the universities, to the UCs. And so that's not very good. I attended the graduation at Channel Islands University, and for one of my teachers that was getting her master's in education, I was very, very disappointed to see what I saw. I saw one. There were about 200 graduates in that area of graduation. There was one graduate. Massive teacher layoffs. That's what the budget is costing. Massive teacher layoffs. Is resulting in overcrowded classrooms. At the elementary level, according to some Princeton University professors, this is what they found out. They did a study. And they found out that smaller classrooms is important to all students, but especially African-American students. You see why? You see, African-American students, we have to keep them focused. Things have to be relevant to them. It has to be meaningful to them. And when a teacher has to be interrupted many times because the classrooms are so big and so large, and they're doing more behavior management than teaching their children. Again, our children will be hard. So what they found out, not only is it important for African American students, but they also found out that when they were in the classrooms of 20 to 1, at that time for grades K through 3, they found out that their academic progress improved. They found out that their dropout rate decreased, and that, here's a good one, their college entrance scores increased and went up. So we see that those small classrooms are very important for those young ones. And at the college and university levels, classes are being cut. And what was intended for 2 years to obtain an associate's degree and 4 years to obtain a bachelor's degree now takes 4 years and 6 years, respectively. Whereas billions of dollars are being invested in the construction of prisons. I just read a study that said they just invested $31 billion to build more prisons. See, funds towards education is plummeting. Fine arts, ethnic studies, things like science camp are all electives of the past. In addition, the number of after-school activities and programs are also being reduced or eliminated. Are not idle hands, devil's workshop. If our children have nothing to do after school, they're more likely to participate or to get involved in gangs, affiliation, the use of drugs, alcohol, crime, okay, reporting in school, eventually they will drop out. And if they don't drop out physically, trust me, many of them are dropping out. It's happening. Prisons do not rehabilitate our youth. They destroy them. We must become proactive. We must all do our part to support education for the next generation. Though we are affected as African Americans, it does show all of us are affected, but it shows that African Americans appear to be the most that are being impacted. I hope we take this to heart. Thank you.
Good evening again. As I mentioned, my name is Byron K. Ward. For those those of you that I'm not acquainted with, I work professionally in human resources, not in the housing function, but I'm going to give you some information about the crisis in housing, which many of you may be familiar with. Mr. Hatcher had a good segue into my presentation. I'm a member of several community committees, organizations, including the NAACP, I'm the community coordinator for the NAACP, APAC, and Juneteenth Committee, CAUSE, African American Leadership Commission. I'm busy, ask my wife. I'm a native of Ohio, graduate of a historically black university, Central State University. And I've lived in Ventura County since 1977. And I'm very humbled to have an opportunity to address you and to be a part of this esteemed committee. And the passion and the knowledge that they're devoting in the interests of the African-American people in Ventura County. But I'm going to try to share this information about housing with as much passion as I can muster, because the stakes are too high to do a poor job.
That's right.
So please listen to my message. It's from my heart. And before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge my wife and my daughter and my granddaughter for being here to support not only me, but the work I'm doing. And also to thank my wife for 26 wonderful years of marriage, which we had our anniversary. American community in Ventura County is under attack. We have essentially been asleep for the last couple of decades, it seems. Maybe even longer than that. For all intents and purposes, the black community is relatively invisible, both individually and collectively. Pastor Cowan used that term, invisible. What I mean by that statement is that we have essentially been marginalized politically, and our power base is not acknowledged. We have not yielded the power that we possess. We have essentially just been content, in my observation, and it's time for us to get busy again. As Brother Malcolm X stated, maybe we've been bamboozled, hoodwinked, and it's time for us to wake up. We maybe have even possibly been betrayed by our community partners, politicians, other representatives, maybe even some of our own leaders. We've been asleep at the wheel, maybe, but ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we live in critical times. We are in a perilous situation. This condition will be chronicled this evening in 5 primary areas that will be highlighted. I'm going to talk a little bit about housing and economics. We're going to talk about the political and criminal justice situation. Nesta has presented some information on our problems in our education system. And we're going to talk about the problems with our mental and physical health in this community. Before I get to the core of my presentation, I'd first like to share some conclusions from a relatively recently published book by Eugene Robinson. Some of you may know him from TV as a commentator. Mr. Robinson has rightly, I think, concluded that blacks or African Americans in the United States now fit into four increasingly distinct segments, separated by demography, geography, and psychology. Those four groups: first of all, a mainstream middle class. And that's important because when I talk about Ventura County, some of the statistics will very clearly point that out. A large, abandoned, what he calls a abandoned minority, which he characterizes as having less hope of escaping poverty, dysfunction, than at any other time since the Reconstruction period. There's a third group that he describes as a small, transcendent elite with such enormous wealth and power and influence that even white folks have to genuflect, and I have to look that one up, or defer to these African Americans of immense wealth. You know them in the entertainment industry, sports, and so forth. And two emergent groups, individuals of mixed heritage, and those communities of recent immigrants. They make us wonder what black is even supposed to mean anymore. Keep this in mind as it frames the context for our presentations this evening. Within the economic arena, let's start nationally and then zero in on Ventura County. Nationally, African Americans and other people of color are succumbing to the housing crisis disproportionately. Study after study has indicated that approximately 8% of African Americans and Latinos lose their homes to foreclosure, while only 4.5% of non-whites lose theirs. Even though the non-whites represent 66% of the homeowners. Think about that disproportion. In discussing this problem, let's begin with the basics. Why do we purchase a house? Is the purpose to buy a house to establish a home, or is it an investment? The sales mantra to buy a house has been the American dream. And according to a report by the Center for Responsible Lending, the push to seek the American dream has backfired. That's what's put us in this housing crisis. Now, I'm not an economist, as I mentioned earlier, but my research has indicated that the housing crisis was perpetuated by three main occurrences in our society: the housing bubble, and then the housing price inflation, and then this so-called bailout. And it's all fueled by easy credit, which has leveraged our futures individually and as a country. The policies of the government and practices of the financial industry have converged to create a perfect storm of financial disaster in this country. Lenders, including banks and mortgage companies, practice predatory lending strategies by making subprime loans to people who should not have received them. And they targeted these people for these type of loans disproportionately. These people who will have a harder time recovering on the effects of this economic crisis we're in. These are African Americans and minorities. For example, a study in 2010, again by the Center for Responsible Lending for the state of California, indicated that African Americans accounted for 8% of foreclosures in the state, while a full 48% were represented by Latinos, but 33% of the foreclosures were by non-whites. Now, the interesting thing about this statistics is that the African Americans foreclosed at an 8% ratio, but they only own 6% of the homes. So that's an indication of how disproportionately people of color have been affected. The number of foreclosures has skyrocketed. And the interesting factor is that it is primarily a middle-class phenomenon, because generally you have to be middle class before you can buy a home. Nationwide, the records indicate that there are over 7 million homes in some level of pre-foreclosure. For the last several years, about 1 million homes have foreclosed per year. In Ventura County, 1 out of every 185 units received a foreclosure notice as of September 2010. Here is how Ventura County cities have rated in those September foreclosures. I'm just going to mention a couple. Matter of fact, let me ask you real quickly, because I only have so much time. How many of you know of someone who has experienced a foreclosure or a housing crisis situation in the last couple of years? Almost every hand has gone up in this room. 42% of the foreclosures in Ventura County are in the pre-foreclosure stage, and 35% are in the auction stage. So there's a lot happening in Ventura County with foreclosure. But let's fast forward. Rather than drilling down continuously in these figures, let me just say that the government has rolled out recovery programs for refinancing and loan modifications, and they have largely been missed by African Americans. They bailed out the banks, but have been largely unsuccessful in bailing out people of color, as the refinancing and modification programs have not been successful in saving African Americans from foreclosure. This is a good time to mention the weak job market that has made unemployment rate a significant factor in the effort to maintain decent housing. African Americans are always represented in the highest number of unemployment ratings, but during the current crisis, unemployment has consistently ranged in double figures, running sometimes 15 to 18% by most accounts. And obviously the lack of jobs is significant in homelessness as well. While there are only 1.1 million public housing units nationwide, the number is well short of what is needed to aid our citizens who are experiencing housing issues. And the course of homelessness is strongly related to mental and physical illness because of the stress, the nutrition, lack of nutrition, and the environmental factors that go along with homelessness. It's a vicious cycle that's been created in our society by this housing situation. As I stated earlier, the result of this perfect storm of issues is impacting our community disproportionately. But what can we do? We are here this evening to present the case that it's time for us to collectively come together to stand up for our own interests The consequences are too great for us to continue the status quo. We have gathered you all here to share a vision of unity, of self-determination, for our community is truly in peril. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, truly 40+%, 41.7% of African Americans in Ventura County own homes, according to some recent home ownership figures. So clearly, we are largely the middle class. We're that group that Eugene Robinson talked about. My conclusion is that this status, firmly middle class, has led us to this precarious position where we live and work every day in a normal way. And then we wake up one day and are presented with a crisis. If it hasn't hit you today, it's going to hit you tomorrow. Ask Dr. McCallum. It's a crisis relating from and attributed to our skin color. It may not be obvious, but it is there someplace. While many of you in this room are active individually to trying to make a difference, it is time to collectively and strategically come together for the good of our community. I heard a couple of recent sermons. I know it's time for me to get off of here. About the story of Moses. Most of us are familiar about the story of Moses and his charge from God to lead his people out of the bondage, lead them to the promised land. Moses was not too excited about receiving that task. And the Lord told Moses to go to Pharaoh and tell him that I am sent you. I'm the one that sent you. Have any of us been sent by I am? I think it is time to stir up the gifts. We have a history of rising to the occasion. Our journey out of slavery, our response to Jim Crow, our leadership of the civil rights movement, and now, after a deep sleep of the last couple of decades, here in Ventura County, it's time for us to wake up. We're a proud people. I urge you to use your power. It's written in 2 Timothy 1:17. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but power and of love and a sound mind. We are more than conquerors. He has given us power, a strong mind, and we are developing unity of purpose. We want you all to step up. Take the pledge. Thank you.
Unlike my committee members, I'm not an orator. I am an educator. So I'm going to do this a little differently. And I'm going to start off by giving this message.
Well, Dr. Fontana passing those out. There's a restroom downstairs if you need to use it, and there's two real good restrooms.
Don't be shy. Come on.
I think so. Okay, we good?
Just a second.
Does someone have a color copy? All right. Well, we haven't even begun to discuss the issues related to the criminal justice system, and yet I think it's pretty obvious, based upon the information that's already been imparted by both Nesta and Byron, that African Americans are just disproportionately at risk. Disproportionately at risk for attrition in the educational system, disproportionately at risk for marginalization, disproportionately at risk for exploitation, disproportionately at risk in general. I'm going to be discussing African American health and public policy as it relates to health. And originally when we discussed this was not one of our issues. And it arose much later on that, you know, one of the substantive outcomes of microaggressions, of systemic racism, is stress that sometimes turns into distress and ultimately emerges as disease. And for whatever reason, well, I can't say whatever reason, for obvious reasons, African Americans are disproportionately at risk for what the old folks call dropping dead. Okay? It was not uncommon for me to come into the house and hear my grandmother say, you know, this so-and-so prostitute, she went to work one day, she just dropped dead. Well, you know, what causes that phenomenon? Why is that something that all of us can chuckle about? I dare say it's because you've heard it so many times, too many times. And so I'd like to draw your attention to some of the statistics that I've given you. And I want to caution you, this is not to depress you. This is to motivate you. Okay? This is to energize you. This is to motivate you to become empowered, not only in your life, but in your household, but in your community. And as I tell my students, I tell them all the time, act locally, think globally. Act locally, but think globally. Okay? All right, so some of these you will recognize, but I want this to be interactive, okay? And because I have a short period of time, please feel free to speak up, because I want you to. All right, so if you look at your handout, I started off with just some general stats about African Americans. And what you'll see repeatedly in all the literature is that we represent what percentage of the national population? Okay, about 12%. How many of you have heard that? Work with me here, I need the energy. All right, 12%. However, there's a projection that we will represent approximately 14.3% in the year 2035. And that number will be translated, or actually that percentage will translate into approximately 50 million nationwide. The greatest concentration of African Americans can be found in the mid-Atlantic regions of the U.S., including Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and in Maryland. Does anyone know what our percentage is here? Anybody? We're going to see in just a minute. Next, what I've provided you with are statistics and demographics that are relevant to Ventura County. And you'll notice that there's a comparison between Ventura County and California, or our state, right? So currently, according to the 2010 census, and this is actually short by one because I didn't fill out the there are approximately 800,000 residents in Ventura County. This is up by about 100,000, which were recorded in 2000. Okay? In addition, I've given some demographics with regard to culture, various cultures that reside in this county. There are, actually, whites represent 68% of the population, followed by African Americans, which is 1.8%, all right? Followed by Native Americans, 1%, Asians, 6.7%, which really surprised me, because I don't see them. I don't know where I am, but I don't see them. Pacific Islanders, was there a comment? Absolutely, absolutely. So you're saying the vast majority of the Asians are Filipinos residing here in this
There's still a
area?
lot of Japanese there.
Japanese?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, in the building in which I live, there are Chinese, and they are primarily, I would say the building is composed primarily of Asians, but I don't see them anywhere else. So, yeah, okay. And then finally, Latinos are 40.3%. Median income, very, very interesting, yes. Biracial, 4%. I didn't have room on the page, it's not there. It's on mine, it's not on yours, okay? But biracials represented approximately 4.6%. So what that means is that there may be more African Americans that are identifying as biracial rather than unilaterally African American. Okay, so our numbers may actually be larger than is indicated here. Okay? What was interesting for me was the median income information. If you look at the median income statewide is approximately $58,000, whereas in this county alone it's 71. That means we have a real dichotomy here between the haves and the have-nots. There are folks in this county with money, okay, most emphatically. And so what was a stark reality for me is that we have a real dichotomy in terms of socioeconomic status right here. Okay, 10% fall under the poverty level. And another thing that was interesting was the number of businesses. Now, Misha, you mentioned that you are a business owner, right? Okay. It's indicated here that the state average is approximately 4%. Okay? Whereas, or I should say the percentage is 4%. Whereas the percentage here in this county is only 1.3% for African Americans. Okay? So that means you are in a very small minority. Native American businesses represent 1.6%, which is slightly higher than the state average. Latino-owned businesses, 15%, and women or female-owned businesses were 28.8%. Okay? So women aren't doing bad. What would be interesting to see is how many of those women who are business owners are also women of color. And that wasn't indicated. Okay, moving on. Okay, now my question to you is, why do you think that it was important for me to do this? And why might I have felt it was important to give you that demographic information? You're absolutely right, but in perspective of how? What does being 1.6% mean for us? We don't have a lot of voice, but let's expand that a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I guess you can talk about policies being made that are not very well.
Okay.
The politicians looks at you as a vote. And whether you're white, black, or whatever, if you can't deliver votes, they're not necessarily in your favor of vote that you want. If you vote to vote for it, that's when you're listening.
Okay. You're absolutely correct. I'm going to that you're going to understand and that's going to be familiar to everyone. We represent a minority status. Minority. And all that that means. Okay? When you are a minority, and I don't mean that we are minorities in the world. I mean it just in terms of our numbers here. Okay? There's a stigma associated with being a minority. You're right. And one of, or a part of that stigma is not having the same recognition, right? Not having the same visibility, and sometimes not being taken into consideration. Does that make sense? Does that sound reasonable? Okay. All right, so let's move on. On page 2, I've listed some of the 10 leading causes of death for African Americans. The first one being heart disease, the second being cancer, the third, cerebrovascular diseases, stroke. The third involves unintentional injuries. The fourth, unintentional injuries. The fifth, diabetes, a big problem in our community. And why is that? Diet, which leads to obesity, right? The two in conjunction. And stress. Thank you very much. Number 6, homicide. Is that surprising to anyone? Okay. It is? That low on the list. Well, let me say this. It's not that low on the list when you're talking about youth. All right? For African American male youth, homicide is the most common cause of death for youth who are 18 years and younger. All right? So, homicide, black on black crime is taking our black men out at record rates. Nephritis, or conditions of the lungs, or conditions of the kidneys, respiratory disease, HIV and AIDS, and then sepsis. Okay? All right. With regard to cancer, although cancer deaths have declined for both whites and African Americans living in the United States, African Americans continue to suffer the greatest burden for each of the most common types of cancer. So in other words, we are most at risk for being diagnosed with cancer. Also in the U.S., white women have the highest incidence of breast cancer, and yet our mortality rates from breast cancer are higher. What does that mean? Access to health care, absolutely. Okay? Also, in 2006, African Americans accounted for nearly half, that is 45% of all new HIV and AIDS infections in the 50 states and District of Columbia, with women, African American women, contracting it more than any other group. I need units. Okay, really quickly. Suicide is the leading cause of death among teenagers. However, the leading cause of death among African American male youth, as I said before, is homicide. Now, because I'm visual, I've provided just a couple of charts for you to look at really quickly. The first one being the overall cancer incidence and death rate. And you'll notice there that for African Americans, we have the highest incidence of all cancers and the highest death rates. Okay? We don't see the doctor until we are at stage 4. Okay? And that's due to being uninsured or underinsured. I need 3. Okay, and I'll make up for it, I promise you. Moving on to page 3, table 4, prostate cancer. African American men have the highest incidence and the highest death rate. Men, get your PSAs checked. Okay? May not be pleasant, but you know, it beats the alternatives. In terms of breast cancer, again, you'll notice via the chart that although there's a higher incidence among white women, that we have a tendency to have a higher morbidity and mortality rate. Okay? All right, so now let's get to the whys. Moving on to mental health. We can't talk about health without considering mind, body, and spirit. And so when we look at the statistics regarding African American mental health, we find that we are disproportionately diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoia. I laugh about the paranoia. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you, right? Be very afraid. Secondly, cultural biases against mental health professionals and healthcare professionals in general prevent many African Americans from accessing care due to prior experiences with historical misdiagnoses, inadequate treatment, and a lack of cultural understanding. Now check this out. All of you young people are thinking about declaring your majors, and Takaya, I know that you're already declared, so I'm not talking to you. But for those of you who are still undeclared, only 2% of psychiatrists and 2% of psychologists and 4% of social workers in the U.S. are African American. We're a part of the 2%. How's that? We all know that African Americans have the tendency to either seek assistance from their clergy, from their primary care physician, before going to a psychologist. And this is the reason why. Okay. Across recent 15-year span, suicide rates have increased overall among African Americans aged 10 to 14 by 233%. And some of this is provocation by cop. Does everyone know what I mean by that? Okay. Finally, somatization, or the manifestation of physical illnesses in the body related to mental health or stress, occurs at a rate that's 15% higher among African Americans, and it's only at 9% among Caucasian Americans. Okay. So, in terms of the way that institutionalized racism manifests itself in healthcare, essentially, racial discrimination in healthcare delivery, financing, and research exists, and racial barriers to quality healthcare manifest themselves in a number of ways. These are the following: a lack of economic access to health care, not having any health insurance at all, or being underinsured. Barriers to hospitals and healthcare institutions by virtue of where you live. Barriers to physicians and other providers. Racial disparities in medical treatment. For example, if you have an HMO, and I'm going to tell a real quick story. I used to do research with African American and Latina breast cancer survivors, and I was looking at the quality of life. And one of the challenges that they were facing was that oftentimes doctors would not make referrals. Doctors would get paid to not make referrals for certain tests. It's common practice a year after chemotherapy to do a bone scan to make sure that it hasn't metastasized to the bone. And what we were having to do is to send these women to advocates so that they could advocate to go and get these bone scans because the doctors would not make the referrals. And this was the difference between life or death. Now, if you think that having cancer and going through chemo isn't enough, can you imagine having to fight with someone to get them to do what they're supposed to do? And this is supposed to be a trusted physician. Okay? This is what we're dealing with, ladies. All right. Finally, I'd like to close by giving you an idea as to what the budget cuts, particularly the state budget cuts that occurred on May 16th, mean for us in this community. Several key Medi-Cal and Healthy Families Program cuts will occur as a result of the decisions that were made on that day. The first one is limited utilization of services. What this means is that patients may be limited to only 7 visits per year to their doctor. Seven visits per year. Now, if you're in generally good health, that's fine. That may be fine. That may be excessive. But if you have a chronic health condition, what does this mean for you? Okay? Secondly, there will be an increase in cost sharing, including a $5 copayment on physician, clinic, and dental services, $3 to $5 copayment on prescriptions, $50 co-payment on emergency room services, and $100 a day for hospital stays. Now mind you, if you're getting Medi-Cal, you're getting Medi-Cal for a reason. You don't have any money, right? So what is this going to mean for the unemployed? What is this going to mean for the working poor? Thirdly, there's going to be an elimination of over-the-counter medicines and annual caps on hearing aid purchases requiring beneficiaries to obtain a prescription. Now, this makes no sense to me. If you're limited to 7 visits per, I'm stopping now. If you're limited to 7 visits a year, okay, and you have a cold, and you have a tendency to not go to the doctor until you're on death's door to begin with, then what do you do if you have a cold or if you have the flu? Do you suffer? Do you use one of those 7? What do you do? It's totally counterintuitive and illogical to me. I'm going to allow you to read the rest of them on your own in the interest of honoring the time. I thank you for your kind attention, and I thank you for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try to get us back on time. So I'm going to just give you bullet points. And as you can tell by hearing Dr. Fontaine that there's a lot of information. Basically, this is just to give you some bullet points today of what we plan to do after this, which is really what we want to get to. This is not about you just coming to hear lectures. We're going to get some interaction here in a moment, but more importantly, we want to tell you what the real next step is. We're just going to highlight a few issues. I'm going to make mine real short, give you some bullet points, and then James is going to talk a little bit about the budget, and then we're going to be coming to a close here. You all heard me a moment ago tell you what happened 2 years ago. What you did not hear is what changed my life in the process of this. I was suffering from something called narcolepsy. I didn't know what that was until this event happened to my wife and I. If you lived around here long enough and you watched the television, read the newspaper, you know my story. That in our pajamas we were handcuffed and accused of something we did not do. I pleaded to something I did not do. And here's the thing that's shocking. Narcolepsy is something that happens to minorities. I had it subconsciously, I didn't know. When you are a minority, you try to fit in to the dominant minority group. This is something that, it's not conscious, it's subconscious. I went through that for years as a leader in this community. And what happens is you start self-hate your own color, your own self, and you don't know it. You don't want to look like your people. You don't want your hair like them. You don't want to talk like them. You don't want to dress like them. You don't want to live like them. This is something very normal that we all go through unless, like Byron, you grow up in a dominant black area. I was born in Santa Barbara, raised in this county. I didn't know I had narcolepsy. As a leader, people would come to me, my own family, and tell me about the judicial system, and I would say, you did something wrong or else you wouldn't be caught up in it. And hundreds of people came to my office telling me their story, and I didn't believe them. Narcolepsy makes you not believe your own color, and if you're black, it means you only believe another black if a white endorses the black. If the white does not say he's okay, you don't say he's okay. It's subconscious.
Come on now.
Institutional racism understands this. This is something, listen, what I'm telling you is something that's very real. And institutional racism understands it. When I was arrested, I said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Look at the facts. Here's my contracts. What are you doing? The first thing the investigator said to me when he pulled up to my house, here's his first words. How does somebody like you afford a house like this? How does somebody like you drive a car like this? Because they assume if you're doing good, you're doing drugs, or if you're not a ball player, you're doing something wrong. Not only was I insulted, but the reality hit me when I understood later about this narcolepsy. That I somehow was against my own race. What do I mean by that? I didn't come out and say it. I didn't even know I had it. when the NAACP had meetings, Mr. Hatcher would tell you they wanted support. I'd support the souvenir book, but I didn't come often. I told some of my friends, sometimes we'd go, sometimes we wouldn't. Because I didn't understand the value of it, but what I really didn't understand is my own prejudice against myself and my own people. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have helped people, my friend Gerald will tell you, I've helped people make thousands, maybe millions of dollars, but none of them are black. And let me tell you, I was in their clubs. And many people like Jim Gilmer and others would tell you, as long as they can benefit from you, you're in the club. And please don't misunderstand me. If you are one step away, one cross of the line away from them saying you are not a part of us anymore, and then the reality hits you. And our Gresson has 5 stages, and I'll skip them for the sake of time, but the 5th stage is once you hit the bottom, once something shakes your life, and then they say, we had lunch together, we took pictures together, but you are still black.
All right. Come on.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. I had lunch with some of these same people that accused me. I invited them in my church.
Say it.
I had politicians every single election. The Attorney General, the guy who ran for Attorney General years ago, came to our church. Take me out to lunch and sit down and talk to our congregation. Every election they want to come to our church like they do every other church. But that's the only time you ever see them. Here's what they know. They understand the judicial system, the institutional racism that most of us have no concept it existed. I didn't until this awakening happened. And let me tell you how it happened, and then I'm done. One of the best attorneys in town who I hired looked at my case and said, McCallum, I'm going to tell you right now, we can beat this. He looked at me with certainty and said, we can beat this. This is a bunch of baloney. He didn't use those words, but he said some other choice words. This is baloney, we can beat this. And then my life changed when he said these words. He said, but here's what I don't know if we can beat. I'll never forget this as long as I live. He says, what I don't think we can beat is the fact that you are black in Ventura County. I said, what are you talking about? I'm a pastor here. I've been here for 20 years. I'm a police chaplain for over 13 years. What are you talking about? He says, you have no concept, do you? I said, I guess I don't. He says, let me tell you how this works. So I said, listen, we're going to go to trial. We're going to get a jury. Some of those are going to be my peers. He said, no, they won't. What are you talking about? No, they won't. So let me tell you how they do this. Now, this is stuff I didn't know. He says, they're going to select a jury. Some will be black, some will be white, some will be Hispanic. He says, the judge is going to ask one question. He said, listen to me, McCallum. This is how it's done. First of all, most blacks will try to get out of jury trial, which you shouldn't. Secondly, the judge is going to ask, if this trial lasts 3 to 4 weeks, can you afford to be off your job? In other words, here's the question. Does your job pay you to be off? Very few people have jury trial benefits from their job, unless you're retired. So he says you're going to sit down and you're going to see an all-white jury of retired people. You're a high-profile black. They perceive you having money, and for some reason, they perceive you having influence. They're going to do all they can to destroy you in the paper. How are they going to do that? So they got to tell the truth? No, they don't. All they have to do is write a story. He said, well, the papers won't go along with that. I was wrong.
That's true.
Because the strongest position in this county and in every county, the pharaohs of the day, are the person that we vote in the DA's office, because there's no government agency that governs the DA's office except our votes. And they already know we're not going to vote. So I'm going to close by telling you this. They told me to my face when I said the black community won't go for this. The black community? Where's the black community? Now let me ask you that. Where is it? Somebody tell me real quick. Raise your hand and tell me. Where's the black community in Ventura County? Anybody tell me where is it? Where is it? Divided was right. Where is it? It's non-existent. It's non-existent. Let me tell you where it is. It's in jail. I saw it. And No one here can point to a black community because we don't have one. This is what I was told. We have black people, not a black community.
And Joe on that contract.
So ladies and gentlemen, let me close by telling you, my eyes were open. They're opened by a young man when I was locked up who came and peeked through my cell and handed me a letter, which I still have. It's going in my book on writing. He says, "You're a giant, we're a grasshopper." He says, "Watch everything that happens here." It's a full-page letter. I can almost tell you word for word, but at the same time I won't. He said, "Please, whatever you do, don't forget us." My new friends are people who have no voice. They're people who are forgotten, people who we think really deserve to be locked up, and I'm telling you, the system figured out a way to recreate the Jim Crow syndrome. Jim Crow, you couldn't vote, you couldn't get any benefits from the government, you had no voice. Nowadays, all you have to do is get a felony, and you meet the new Jim Crow standards. This is the reality. If you don't believe it, in time you will call the NAACP or you will call a black church to help you. And here's the sad fact. If we don't come together, it won't even matter. The institutional powers told me this. The black community can't do anything. This is what they told me. I want you to understand, I'm a pastor. This is what they said. They said, "You guys don't work together." They're telling me this. And so they mention organizations like NAACP, they mention my church, they mention St. Paul, they mention Bethel. I told all these pastors the same. I told them their names were mentioned. What they fear is our unity. But I'm telling you, they're betting big bucks. It'll never happen. So we're for community connectedness, but before we can connect with community, we have to connect with each other. I went to every pastor that would listen to me, and I apologized and asked forgiveness. And every black person that I could talk to that had any significant position, I asked their forgiveness for my digressive syndrome that I had. And I changed. At the close of this, we're going to ask you to change and to pledge to something that's bigger than all of us. It was Dr. King who said, "Injustice done to one is injustice done to all." Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, they have a plan. It starts with our kids. Just watch the system. It starts with our kids to get them in the juvenile system, and they just own it. The whole 3 strikes, all that, is primarily because it's a good way to eliminate us. And all I'm asking you, and then James is going to come, and then we'll open up, and then we'll wrap this up, and ask you for something very important that we can all do together. In this community, you heard Gina talk about the 1.6. It used to be, by the way, 2.2% black just a couple years ago. You notice that it's not discrimination. Notice the elimination. This is the plan. Now, in our judicial system, think about this. 1.6, 1.8 blacks in this community. Think about this. For every person arrested and convicted in Ventura County, there's a 5-to-1 ratio. 5 blacks to 1 white. I'm talking same crime. 1.6% people. The only way that could happen, 5-to-1, something has to be happening on purpose. You cannot accidentally do that. And if we don't wake up, I'm telling you, listen, they will tie our hands forever. So I'm asking you all to think about these things with the judicial system when it comes to jury. Don't get out of jury trial. Accept the call to do those things, and more importantly, to understand that there is a real institutional racism, and it is not fair to us. Just go to Ventura County, sit down, just sit down. Watch how they parade people through, talk to the judge. It'll break your heart. It'll flat break your heart. And I guess what I'm just asking is, please don't be like I was. Do not get so busy building your own empire, building your own vision, that you think you can do this alone. I really close by saying this. I told every pastor that would listen to me, there's no one church big enough to do it. There's no one organization. There's 60 black organizations in this county, and not one of our organizations can do this alone. We do not do this together. We do not come together as one voice. They win. It's as simple as that. So I thank you for your time. James is going to share something very quickly, and then we'll open things up and we'll bring this to a close.
I'd like to thank Pastor McCowan for that very personal but telling story here. I'm not going to take up too much of your time here. I'm going to introduce myself again because many of you all, you've seen me just around for the past 2 years. But my background came from born and raised in the outskirts of Baltimore, Maryland, by way of Ohio, where I went to school, and been a newspaper reporter for about 10 years, going across the country, seeing very similar things happen in communities like and dislike Ventura County. The challenge has been is, as a reporter, you report the news, and sometimes you report the news that people create for you, and then you move on. You can't really impart your knowledge or what you're seeing from here to there. Well, now I've been given and blessed with the opportunity to work for a state assemblyman, a newly elected state assemblyman, who does not fit that general mold of a politician of what I thought, of the politic, as I used to call it, the multiple blood-sucking insects, as I broke the word down to. But what I'm going to give you now is a brief overview, and right before I do that, I'm going to tell you what I do as a field representative is I create the illusion that the government works, because it doesn't. For many people like you and I, the government does not work. And so essentially what I'm doing is extending that hand, because whoever sits in that office, they extend the hand to the people who they want to the people who look like them, to their family members. And so what we've been doing is extending our hand in our office to folks who don't traditionally have that extended to them, and the regular folks as well. Where we're talking about this all comes in culmination when we start looking about our state budget and also our federal budget, but I can only talk about our state budget. Where we are now. In January, our state was faced with a $26.6 billion budget deficit. I don't even know how that looks. You would have put $26 billion together, what that would look like. However, in order to come out of that deficit, he could compromise the plan of half cuts and half revenue extension. That's meaning programs and services eliminating, and revenue extensions meaning extending temporary funding streams, such as on your purchases, income, and autos. That part would have to ultimately be approved by voters. That would require a 2/3 vote from both the Senate and the House, and then so that would, knowing the way the numbers line up, that means the Democrats can do all they want to talk about how great they are, and my guy's a Democrat, but it still requires 4 Republican votes in order to get something to happen. That is yet to come to fruition. And so this plan that the governor put forth back in January had spared cuts to public education, and that's pretty much universally understood to be a vital public service, something that as Pastor McCowan said, when these attacks are happening, they're starting at our youth and cutting the legs out before you even get a chance to run. Okay? And so what happened with that whole situation is the Democrats in the legislature approved $11.2 billion in cuts and other solutions in order to do a long-term fix on the budget. So what you'll hear that called in the news is the structural deficit, which means things like long-term budget fixes, things like infrastructure, spending cuts, revenue extensions. But still, at the end of that, there was $9.6 billion left in the hole by the end of 2012. And that's what the budget was. Although Governor Brown needed to get these 4 votes in order to get this tax extension situation put on the ballot and approved by voters, so it wouldn't have to be all cuts. I now have that access. I do hear all the rumor mills of what goes on in Sacramento, not all of them, but a lot of them. The rumor is that he'll be coming out with a plan B on the budget coming soon. But what that means is it could be an all cuts budget, which means, okay, the cuts that we've already had to our education system, $18 billion over the past 3 years. The cuts that we've already had to our UCs, currently proposed $500 million to the UC, $500 million cuts to the CSU system. It's going to be deeper. You know, those numbers sound harsh, but it's going to get worse if we can't figure out a way to do it. Now, call to action. What does that mean? What does that mean that you can do? One of the many things you can do is you can contact the Republican legislature. Number one being Tony Strickland. He wields a lot of power within the state Republican Party, and he is one of the main ones holding up putting this tax extension on the ballot and or approving it himself. The number two, his Simi Valley office is 805-306-8886. That's 805-306-8886. You can call, you can write, you can set up appointments with him to stress the importance of, we need you to put these tax extensions on the ballot. It's important for you, it's important for your families, and it's important for the programs to support your families. Whether you're, as Byron was talking of, those four different classes of African Americans, whatever class of African American you are, mainstream, emergent, transcendent, this is going to affect you. These budget cuts are going to affect you. And so, one of the things you can do, of course, is, like I said, contact your lawmakers. The other thing, and this is somewhat of a plug, but not really, but this is an extending access to you. There is a budget town hall where you actually can get to come out. My boss, Doc Williams, is sponsoring this town hall, which is going to be right here at Oxnard High School. We had one in Ventura, it was successful. We had one in Santa Barbara, it was successful. Dr. Irene Pinkert talked to my boss and said, well, you've had one in Ventura, you've had one in Santa Barbara, why don't we get one in Oxnard? We now have one in Oxnard, so you can thank Dr. Pinkert and a few conversations on that. And that'll be July 8th from 4 to 6 p.m. Understanding that's not the most convenient time for working folks. However, if you attend this event, this is an opportunity where we'll talk about different potential budget cuts that are on the table. You'll get a clicker in your hand when you walk in the door. You'll get to talk about these issues, and then everybody gets to vote. You'll get the results right on the screen, and you'll get a better understanding of how this budgeting process happens, because it's all a learning process for me, and I hope to share that learning process with my community, which is y'all now. Y'all are stubborn. As we move forward. And I will close on that. There's brochures here for this town hall meeting that will be coming up here in a few weeks, and I reserve the right of my time to please this evening.
Awesome. At this time, what we're going to do, Bishop, if you can come up here, we're just going to talk a little bit about the free town hall meeting, which is one of the reasons we wanted everybody here tonight to let you know what's coming up, and the dates, of course, will be sent out to you. We'd like to get everybody's information. There's two very important things. One is we want to talk about this pre-town hall meeting, and we want to get your input. And also, we want to wrap things up with a very important pledge that we want to ask you all to participate in.
It is so important that we have your input as far as the day, the time, the amount of time that we should use on the town hall, and also topics of importance that are affecting you. So many times we cover things, but it's not the things that we need to be covering. So if it's foreclosure, if it's racial profiling, if it's not being able to get a job, whatever that is, we need to know. Every Monday, we have a meeting here, 6:30. We're invited to come, share your thoughts and ideas. It's supposed to be 6 o'clock, but it's important that we find out the real agendas that are affecting us in day-to-day life, so that when we come together, we are putting our minds, hearts, and spirits and souls in the right place to make something positive happen. Can we do that? I want to make sure, if you have not, that you signed in. It's important that you sign in and that you have a contact phone number or your email. At this time, Pastor McCown is going to come to the pledge.
One of the things I mentioned to you just in our addresses is I had to make a decision, well, what do I do from here? I found out there's 60-some black organizations, and as a black pastor of a multiracial church, I didn't know that there were 60 organizations. Maybe you didn't even know that. Whether there's 60 or 600, if we don't work together, we might as well have zero. The powers that be told me the black community can do nothing. I said, yes, they can. He said, because we'll come together. He said, no, you won't. This is what I was told that, I said, this is going to be a problem in the black community. This is what was told to me by a very prominent politician. He said, this is how we handle the black community. My word of honor, and I've shared this with Mr. Hatcher many times. This breaks my heart. He says, what we do is we will get 2 black leaders in the black community, and we'll cut a deal with one of them. Our problem is now solved. They'll go back and take care of whatever we need to take care of. They start organizations and put figureheads of black people many times so that it could appear that they're doing something for our community. If you look at the bottom line where money's distributed, real significant positions, you never see it get there. But it's an illusion because they know we like taking pictures with them, we like titles, we like being able to say, this is my friend. So I said, what are we going to do? I talked to Mr. Hatcher, who really helped center me. I was told the NAACP won't be able to do anything. They talked about him like they talked about me and other pastors and other black leaders. But I went to him and then something happened. I realized that one of the reasons they didn't want me to talk to him is because the most powerful brand in the black community is the NAACP. And they were afraid that that brand would get involved and perhaps bring some national attention. And it wasn't until I sat down with him, and they knew I was sitting down with him, and then they saw his face. They understood one thing about Mr. Hatcher, which I personally appreciate, and I appreciate it more than ever today because I know the institutional racism powers understand this one thing about our local chapter in NAACP led by Mr. Hatcher, and he didn't ask me to say this. Here's what they know, and it's what I found out. They know that he cannot be bought. That's the thing they feel. They feel every black person has a price. I can buy you. There's a price. But they know they can't buy him. That's what I was told. That's why they feared him. We're honored to have somebody like him leading our local chapter, let me tell you.
That's right. That's right.
He will fight until he dies for black people.
Amen.
He's a little dogmatic, I know. But you have to understand his story. When I talked with him and he told me as a little kid, as a boy growing up, he saw black people lynched. He saw them hanging from poles. A white woman walked towards him on the sidewalk. He had to get in the street, step aside. You hear a story like this, you start understanding people's passion, where they come from. So I said, you know what, if there's 60 organizations, what can we do? What can we start doing right now? What can we do that when you walk out of here, you can say, if nothing else, I'm plugged in, I'm part of the pledge, I belong, we're part of the community. What can we do right now while we're figuring out what we're going to do? Obviously, unity is essential, and that has to happen. Today, myself, Bishop Allen, and other pastors, some that you all mentioned churches you go to, we sat down at our African-American Ministers Association that's growing and probably going to be one of the most effective African-American ministerial associations that we've ever had in this county. First time ever, 20 years since I've been in ministry, I see the light at the end of the tunnel with the black pastor. And you couldn't get black pastors, you couldn't get pastors of churches to work together. How in the world are you going to get people to work together? But it's beginning to happen. So what can we do? I said, how can I do this individually first? And then after doing it, I talked to a few people on the team, the committee and they thought this is good, let's do this with everybody. I made the decision just because of my digressing. What I was going to do is three things. And we're asking as a committee for all of you to participate in these three things. We can start passing these around, in fact, while I'm talking, because it's very simple. There's nothing real deep about it. It's the three things, and you'll notice three circles. The big circle is the green, the next one is the red, and then the black circle is the smallest. The objective here is so that people who are uncomfortable working together, because one of the things that we deal with is, like I said when we opened, that 97% negative talk about our own people. And while you're sitting in here, imagine, the studies prove that the biggest thing you're going to fight is how your negativity about me and other people that's talking and about people that's in here. So I thought what we can do first is pledge that we would, number one, connect to my brothers and sisters in the community. Would you come here for a second? What do I mean by that? Sometimes you're in Target, or you're at the mall, or you're at Starbucks, and you see another black, and you know what we do? There's only 1.6% of us. You know what we do? We act like we don't even see it. I did this for years. Sometimes I used to do this, but what I decided to do, I vowed I will never again in this county or anywhere I go walk past a black without speaking. So that everybody can do that, even if you don't like each other, you can at least speak. So I said the first thing I would do, and I do this everywhere I go, if I see a black, I stop. How you doing? If they stop and speak back, a lot of times they're shocked. The next thing I do is I say, my name is Lonnie McKell. And I'll go to shake their hand. If they're too uncomfortable, I want to at least I speak. Most blacks are shocked. We walk down the same aisle and we act like we don't see each other. We're only blacks in the store. So I said, I'm trying to fit into the dominant culture. Once tragedy hits you, here's the awakening that takes place. You realize you are okay like you are. You don't have to fit into a culture. You can be who you are. And so the first thing we're asking is to connect. Anytime you see a black, don't just walk past them. Speak to them. If you see them with the signs that say, homeless, I'm hungry, I help the blacks. We've got to just start doing little bitty kind things. So that's the first one. That's the big one. If you don't want to do anything else, just connect. And when you leave here, make the pledge to always speak to another black. The red is to commit. Commit to, you turn on the back, and it has some of the things about committing. Seek to understand the bigger picture of our culture, community by realizing the power and unity. Have one-on-one meetings, get to know people. That's how Byron and I became so close friends. People have been telling us for years to get together. Finally we sat down, we started talking, having coffee, got to know each other. When I heard Mr. Hatcher's story, I said, nobody can tell me anything about Mr. Hatcher other than he will not betray black people because I heard his story. So get to know each other. Some of you have heard things about me, about Bishop. Well, he's pretty new at pastor, but it'll happen pretty soon. you don't know that stuff. They still talk about it. Sit down with me, have coffee, and you judge for yourself. And take the time to get the stories, and then support businesses and organizations, our culture. And then here's the most important thing: say nothing negative about other blacks in our community. I vowed to do this. I vowed. I told the pastors. I said, I don't even care. I know some talk about me. No one will ever get me, ever, publicly or privately, say anything negative about another black ever again. Ever. Because I know our struggle. And we're asking you to do the same thing. If somebody comes to you, they're going to talk about somebody blacks and you don't know the whole story. You let it go. You don't have to preach to them, you don't have to do anything beyond that. Just say, hey, I made a pledge. I'm not talking about another black person. They got enough to deal with. Their fight is big enough. We have enough folks talking about us. I'm not participating. Finally, the third thing we're asking, that's the black, about what is the colors of the African flag, African flag, an African flag. And each color means something, and Musa can tell you what they mean. But the covenant is to make a covenant And this is what I did. I made a covenant. I used to tell some of my friends I made it. You know, you hit a certain point, you think you made it. And the bank president calls you and says, Mr. McCowan, you don't have to come to the bank anymore. If you want money for the bank, you want to make a deposit, we'll come to your office. You think you made it. And it's pretty good. You could sign something, and they give you money, have a stack of credit cards with a couple $100,000 balances. That's huge. And you do think you made it until something happens. And they say, give me all that stuff back. You're not one of us for real. Very real. The good thing is, once you learn how to do it here, they can't take that. So you never worry about it. But I made a decision and vowed that I would never see myself as made it until we all have made it. We're asking you to pledge to that. It's not enough for you, you're for, and no more. But all of us have to be able to come to the same table and enjoy the same benefits. I can no longer sit at home with another black brother or sister fighting the judicial system, fighting the school system, fighting the health system, and be content because I have health insurance or because I have whatever. You cannot rest until all of us come to the same table. To make this pledge, we've asked something real simple. We created these little bands here that just says, I pledge. And you can't buy these. You have to pledge. You have to make the pledge. And you know what? I'll do that. You don't have to raise your hand. You doing that. You just have to, on your word of honor, say, you know what? I can do those three things. That's simple. And if you can't do all three of them right now, if you say, no, I'm not going to, I'm making it if I make it with or without you, then at least just do the first one. Connect. Maybe as you get to know people, you move to the middle circle. So in closing, we'd like all of you to make this pledge. If you do, we want to give you one of these bands tonight. We want you to wear it. And don't be embarrassed wearing it. I had somebody call me and said, hey, Pastor Lonnie, I heard about these bands. I want one. I said, well, you can't have one without making the pledge. I said, you can't just buy one. This means something. So I explained what it means. He goes, well, I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't do that. He says, because this was just what he told me. He says, because my word of honor, he says, if the white people see this, they will think you're doing something like they did with the Black Panthers. Y'all remember that? And I said, it's amazing. The Hispanics can have their colors. Every other group can have their colors. But when it comes to us, we have to be so afraid of working together. They fear us coming together. So I wear mine when I preach in my multiracial church. And I wear it all the time. You wear yours too. We're asking you to wear yours. And let it be a reminder when you see another black person. Now, does this mean we don't connect with everybody else in the community? Of course we connect with everybody else, but we need to connect with our people first because we've been so disconnected.
Right.
So we're asking you to make the pledge tonight, and if you do so, we will hand everybody one of these bands. We want you to put it on and let it be a reminder, and we hope one day to see all the blacks around here with a band on. And if you see somebody with one of these bands, you know. They made the pledge. You know it. And so it ought to mean something. And if they don't have one, somebody asks you, then you tell them what it's about. With that, I do thank you. We're going to make the pledge. Everybody, you lead us in the pledge.
Those of you who would like to make the pledge, I'm going to ask you with your card to stand. And then as you stand, understand the power of the vow. The Bible says it's better not to vow than to make a vow and not hold on to it. Amen? So whether you be male or female in here, I'm going to ask you at the appointed time to say your name. And when you say your name, I'm going to begin to read the pledge, and then I'm going to have you read the pledge along with me. I pledge, say your name. I pledge to connect to my brothers and sisters in my community. I pledge to be a positive influence in my community. I pledge to be in covenant with my brothers and sisters in my community. Shout out Connect. Respectfully acknowledge those in our cultural community wherever you see them. Repeat that. Respectfully acknowledge those in our cultural community wherever you see them. Commit. Commit to positively rebuilding and restoring connectedness in our cultural community. Commit to positively rebuilding and restoring connectedness in our cultural community. Shout out covenant. Make a covenant to connect, commit, and support one another in complete unity. Make a covenant to connect, commit, and support one another in complete unity. For the sake of time, I want you to turn this over, and as I looked at it, we are only going to read the bottom PowerPoint under each one, and then we're going to pledge. Shout out Connect. Bottom line. Connect ourselves as role models for the younger generation in our cultural community. Commit. Commit to understand the social and institutional engineering that causes us to trust and disconnect from each other. Shout out Covenant. Cultural excellence. Cultural respect. Say this, I pledge to connect, to commit, and to covenant, to this cause, this day, this society, this reason, for the things we've heard tonight, and in your faith, either amen or amen. Amen. Pass out.
Hey, Dudley, how are you?
We are almost at that point.
I'm still standing.
We didn't have a seat when it passed the
Been up since 3 o'clock.
Before we leave, make sure. Hold on for just a moment. We want to make sure to visit this table. This is a power-packed, informative table. Make sure to stop by and get a card, get a flyer, get a brochure. And at this time, you're in the hands of John R. Hatcher, the third.
Real quickly, right before Mr. Hatcher blesses us here real quickly, we want to make sure that this isn't just, we got our short-term action, but we need to make sure we've got a plan for our long-term action as well. We've got 4 sign-up sheets over here that say education, criminal justice, health, and housing. These are the 4 areas that we discussed tonight. These are the 4 areas that's going to carry us through as we're having our conversation, getting prepared for the town hall meeting coming up. And these are the working committees that you'll be able to work on. These sign-up sheets are right over here, so in your cycle, as you're getting the information off of this table, make sure that you please sign up for one of these committees and provide us with your email address and contact.
Again, I'm John R. Hatcher III, President, Ventura County NAACP, and I am extremely happy to see all of you here. And one of the things that really made me feel good was when I could see the young adults participate. I would like to see each and every one of us together again as we pledge to march through. You may not know this, but I would like you to know that Ventura County have now got the most influential, powerful group of people together right here. Because we now can control our vote. We now can make decisions for us, with us, without having someone that knows very little about us to come out and speak for us.
That's right.
And that bothers me every day. I go to places, and I'm sure that Reverend McCollum can tell you, I go into places and sit down and talk to people, and then some of us get upset because they will open the door and let me in and will not let them in. And they then start trying to undermine what we're doing. And so I feel good with the fact that all of us pledged we will not go around and talk about one another. We would do everything we can to support one another. And as long as I got breath in my body, and as long as I live, and I'm sure Angela will vouch for that, I will fight for you to the last. I have no problem. I will get out and fight in a minute. Matter of fact, there's a gentleman standing in the back door there. He was at the hospital. I was at the hospital and they was discussing what they was going to do, and I told him I want to get out of here. There was a meeting going on. And he said, well, you got a ride? I said, no, you going to take me to the meeting. So he tell you, I will go to a meeting. And McCowan used to laugh because I'd take my little stick and my face towel and I'd make it on up to the DA's office or where I got to go just for us. And you can't tell me that our kids cannot make it in this society. And you can't tell me that our kids do not understand about church. If we don't take them, then they won't know about church. That's right. But I think what we need to do, and then I want to give thanks to a couple of people, what we need to do is pull together like, if you was in Birmingham, Mississippi, or those places, black people knew one another. Black people supported one another. They may not like Ms. Jones, but I bet you when it comes down to support, they were there for one another. And that's what we asking you to do as first pledge. I want to personally thank Gina Fontaine, Dr. Fontaine. This young lady worked late at night trying to make sure that we stayed on top of everything. And then she call you, not one time, she call you until she gets it. And when it comes to getting the agenda out or come to getting the meeting together, Gina was there. And Gina will bug you till you get here. So I just want you guys to meet our running person. We haven't selected a leader. And she's actually the #1 leader in the group. Okay. Now, I want to end by saying thank you again. Really, you don't know how I feel about this. I have the NAACP meeting and it's sometimes packed, but I can really tell you what's the problem. Whenever we have a meeting that's packed, somebody that got hurt in this community, or the police that beat up someone, or something happened in our community, we need to get together like it's a party. I don't mean it as a party, but we need to get together. You know, and we need to work with our ministers and get them involved. One of the things I can say for Brother McCowan is that he made a pledge that he was going to work with the ministers to pull them together. Bishop Allen said that he was going to make things happen. And then the next thing I knew, it started snowballing. Everybody wanted to make something happen. So I kind of sit back. I'm the guy that always makes it to be safe. And that's probably a reason for that, is that gives them a chance to talk about me before I get there. Anyway, thank you again.